Hi and welcome to the next episode of QML tutorial. In previous lessons we have used a lot of hard-coded data coming just out of our fingers, just for simplicity. But in the real world, it's not how it works. Most data comes from someplace. For example, from the REST API. And how connect to REST API in Qt and QML? This is the topic of this episode. My name is Lukas Kosiński. I am the CEO of Sci Studio, QML consulting company. We help our customers achieve their objectives by providing them with skilled Qt developers. In modern network-based applications, data is usually stored on the servers, and it is done to unify the UX among all the users, to aggregate data, to store the data, to save space on end user devices, to make statistics, to prevent fraud, and to many other purposes. In the case of applications whose task is to display and modify data, communication is often based on requests and responses. The client, like application, makes a request to a server, and in a return it gets a response reply with hopefully desired content, for example informing if something was done on the server or not, or with some data. And one of the most popular standards is REST API, which is based on post and get queries and JSON or XML format. Let's see how to connect to REST API in Qt. Enjoy! Client-server communication in modern applications is simply the exchange of information between the two components. The client, which is typically an application running on a user's device, and the server, which stores and manages data or performs computations. REST API is a specific way for clients and servers to communicate. It follows a set of rules and conventions to exchange data over the internet. REST API uses web addresses as endpoints, allowing access and manipulation of data on server. REST APIs use common HTTP methods like get, post, put, delete, and there are also other to perform actions on the data. Then API responds with a data in a simple format like XML or JSON. In networking, it's also possible to create your own type of communication by directly working with raw bytes using sockets. For example, in Qt, there is a class called QTCP socket that allows you to establish a connection and exchange data with another socket. Also, if you need an encrypted connection, there is also a QSSL socket. However, in most cases, reinventing the wheel is not a good idea. Fortunately, there are already many well-known and widely used solutions available for our needs. So, how do we connect to a REST API in Qt? Firstly, we need something that would handle the requests. By handling, I mean sending and receiving them. In Qt, we have the QNetwork Access Manager class. It acts as a manager for network requests, so it allows communication with the REST API using HTTP methods. Then we need to somehow construct such a request. We need to define precisely what we want to do and from which endpoint in the server we want to get data. We can use for that QNetwork request class. This class represents a request and contains the URL, headers, and other information. We create an instance of QNetwork request and set the necessary details like the URL of the API. Then, to actually send the request, we use the Q network access get function, for example. We pass the Q network request object variable as a parameter, and then these methods return a pointer to Q network replay. We should store a response so later, after it's ready, we'll be able to process it. We can do that in some other way, but later in the coding section, I will show you how I do that. Yeah, and finally, we need to know when the response is available. So we connect to Q network access manager's finished signal to, for example, our own slot. In this slot, we can use the stored pointer to Q network reply and then read the response data. We can get the response body as a Q-byte array and process it as needed. Yeah, and that's how the whole process of making HTTP requests and parsing responses looks like in Qt. Yeah, it's really simple. Additionally, the Q Network Access Manager class provides signals to handle special cases like authentication or SSL errors. Yeah, but I won't bother you with that. Let's keep it simple for now. The very basics of the network communication will be enough. Okay, we have our response, but what do we do with it? In most cases, REST APIs receive requests and return responses using JSON. JSON is simple to use language independent data format, which is widely supported by most of the programming languages. In Qt, we have a wide range of classes providing creation and parsing of JSON data. There is QJSON document, which represents whole data structure, providing access to all its elements and allows to create such a structure from the scratch. There's also QJSON object representing single JSON data element and many other classes representing values like, for example, QJSON array. Yeah, in other words, we do not have to worry as Qt has it covered. Okay, how do we interact our player app with REST API? The simple scenario is searching for the songs and playing them directly in our app. And that's what we will do today. Previously, our add button added some random stuff to our playlist. Now we will make it bring a search panel, which will firstly make a request through the C++, and then we will display output via the list view connected to search results model. And then after clicking one of the results, we will just add it to our playlist. REST API will provide remote link, and thanks to QMedia Player, we'll be able to play MP3 songs from URLs. But from where would we get that data? Fortunately, I found some free-to-use API providing functionalities exactly matching our needs. However, first you have to create your account here. It's not complicated. You just need to provide an email, password, verify your email, and then you should be good to go. After that, you need to get your client ID, which may look like this, and then you can use it in your app. I encourage you to create your own account here anyway, so you can play with it by yourself. Yeah, so having our client ID prepared, we can start some coding. In order not to bore you with repetitive steps or my breaking voice, my cough, I have already prepared a few things. The first is a model with search results that looks like the model that stores the playlist. It acts as a list encapsulating Q list of audio infos. You can notice that the role names are also the very same as in player controller. However, in this model, we will modify it right away to be populated with data from the internet, hence the name, audio search model. I also added registration of this model in main CPP in order to make QML see it. Yeah, and I also prepared a QML search panel with nice animation containing a list view with ready delegates to make it as pretty as the rest of the app. Delegates contain an image which will be displayed in the list. Yeah, and additionally, I implemented a text input named search field, and I adjusted its look to match the whole UI. Its place in the top bar item in QML. It is only visible when a search panel has been brought up. Also, the playlist button and playlist panel are hidden whenever the search panel pops up. Yeah, so now we can start implementing requests. Let's go to audio search model. Yeah, firstly, we need Q Network Access Manager instance. We'll store it as a class field. Q Network Access Manager is a class that we need to make requests. But first we need to add an appropriate header. We can do it quickly by pressing our beloved Alt plus Enter shortcut. We can also right click and select refactor and click the right header. And next we need to store the response someplace to process it later. We will store it in a field of type QNetworkReply. It will be a pointer and with a default value of null pointer. Next, we need to define two slots. One will be for searching for a song, and it will make network request. So let's name it search song. It's going to have parameter, and the second one would be named parse data. It will parse the response when it's ready. Okay, let's implement those methods. Maybe before we do that, let's take a quick look at the API's documentation. We want to search for song by given name, so let's check read methods and tracks endpoint. Yeah, as you can see, they stated here that audio download allowed field is returned, so some songs may not be allowed to be downloaded as MP3. So we have to remember about that before we encapsulate data. Before we do that, we need to check if it will be actually possible to play it by just checking this field. Yeah, let's scroll down. As you can see, client ID parameter is required here. Fortunately, we got one. Then there is a name search parameter, which allows you to search song by a name. Then there is also a possibility to change output format, for example, to XML, JSON, JSON pretty, which looks much nicer thanks to formatting. But for app purpose, we will stick to JSON. Yeah, and here it's an example request. As you can see, it's just simply an URL with parameters passed, nothing unusual here. Finally, we can check how the response looks like. Yeah, so as you can see, here we have all needed information, like song name, artist name, album image source, and audio direct MP3 source. This is all what we need. Here, however, notice that all returned URLs begin with HTTPS protocol. Within whole course, we have used Qt 6.4.2, but there was a bug that was making QMedia Player unable to play sources using HTTPS protocol. So today we will change to Qt 6.1. That's the version in which the bug was fixed for sure. To change the used kit, you need to go to projects and change the kit, and then you can build using new kit, but you have to download it first using Qt maintenance app. Okay, so knowing the structure of get URL and response content can start implementing our methods. Let's start by let's start with search song. Firstly, let's check if the string parameter is not empty. Let's check it trimmed version. It has all spaces removed in the beginning and in the end. Yeah, so if it's not empty, then before we actually start making the request, we need to check if it's not in progress already. We can check it by verifying if m reply is a null pointer. If it's not, then we can call abort on it. Yeah, but first we need to include the right header. Yes, and now we can abort. We can then call delete later, and now we can nullify the variable. Okay, so now we should be able to start making requests. Firstly, let's store a request URL in anonymous namespace using a const QString type. So const QString, let's name it Q request URL. I will just copy it from the site because I don't remember. It's here. Let's copy and let's put it here. Now we also need to store our client ID also as anonymous variable. So yeah, this one, let's name it Q client ID. And I will just paste the one that I have. Okay. And now we can start building our request. Let's create a Q URL query instance. Again, we need to include the header. Yeah, now we can just add keys and their values to the query. Firstly, let's add client ID parameter. Let's remind ourselves how it exactly looks like. Okay. And the value is going to be key client ID. Then we can pass the search song name. I will again make sure how the parameter was named. Name search. Yeah, and finally the value and the format parameter. It's going to be JSON. Yeah, and we have everything to actually make a request. We do it by assigning to our mReply variable the result of mNetworkManager get method. As a parameter for this method, we construct QNetworkRequest object with an URL parameter. We need to use a concatenation of Q request URL question mark and the query string using query toString method. Then we have to process the result when it's ready, so we connect Q networks reply finished signal to our parse data slot. Just like this. Yeah, now let's implement parse data too. Firstly, we have to make sure that there is no error in our reply. So if request was successful, we can check if there was no error. If there was no error, then we can start filling our model with results. Firstly, we need to call beginner reset model, as we are filling the model with whole new set of data. And we need to call the end reset model as well. In the meantime, we clear the list for real. We store audio infos as pointers, so we can use qDeleteAll function on our container, and then we can clear list explicitly. Yeah, and now we can read the reply actually using replies read all method, and let's store it to qbyte array. Yes, and now we can convert the data to QJSON document. Yeah, firstly, I'm going to need a header. Yes, and then we can parse it using QJSON document from JSON method. Then we will need some additional JSON classes. So let's include QJSON object and QJSON array. And yeah, then we can proceed. Let's check again how the response looks like. Okay. As you can see, there are headers and result objects. Headers inform about request result status, and results contain a list of songs. We can do it, we can get headers to first check if the request was successful by accessing headers object like this. QJSON object headers, JSON document headers, and we need to convert it to object. Yeah, now we can access JSON objects just like a map of keys and values. It's like a bit like in JavaScript. Yeah, so we need firstly to check if the status field of the headers is equal to success. Then otherwise we will print the error string field as a warning in the console. Yeah, and now to parse results, in case of success, we define QJSON array results, and we set it to JSON document results. We need to specify that it's an array. Yeah, and then we need to iterate over each result. We can do it using a simple for range loop, just like this. And inside, we can create QJSON object that will encapsulate a single result, like this. And yeah, then we need to check if it's allowed to be downloaded. So we need to check entry audio. Let me check that. How was it named? Okay, let's copy this. Yes, and now let's convert it to Boolean and to check if it's true. Yes, and then we can simply add new audio info entry to our list basing on values contained in this JSON object. So we have to create a new instance. We will set this as the parent. And yes, now we are ready to read our JSON object. We have entry name as a title. We have entry artist name as an author name. We also have what we have there. We have entry image as well. And finally, entry audio download as an audio source. Yeah, and then we just append our result to the list. Yeah, and finally, after parsing everything, we should ensure that we did not forget about end reset model. It's here. It's required to notify that model is ready to be read. Yes, and if an error occurred, we need to firstly check if it's not simply cancelled error. In such a case, that error was raised intentionally, and we should not be worried. In another case, let's just print the error string to using QCritical output. Yeah, and finally, after we are done with response, we can call delete later on reply object and nullify it with null pointer. Now it would be nice to let QML know if the search is currently being performed. So to do so, we'll go back to the header, and we'll create QProperty of type bool named isSearching. Let's generate its fields. Yeah, and now I will get rid of write. SQL should not change it. And then in search song, we'll set isSearching to true using the setter. And finally, in parse data, we will set it to false. Okay, now let's go to UI. Before we start QML coding, I just wanted to show how I connected it. I really like to brag myself about things that I have done. In playlist panel, I just wanted to show you that I removed the add audio method invocation from add button. Now instead it hides the playlist panel and emits the new signal search requested added into the root item. Then in main QML, I connected to the signal to on search requested, and inside I bring the search panel to the top. Okay, so now maybe let's go back to search panel, and as I said before, I prepared a similar delegate to that one from the playlist panel. As you can see, this list view is also connected to our new audio search model. We are, however, still missing something. We need to actually invoke network request from the UI. So maybe let's go back to main QML, where I created search field. And here we can connect to on accepted slot. Accepted is a signal that I declared in search field. It's a custom type. Yeah, so let's connect. And inside we need to invoke the request here when the user accepts the input. We will simply pass value argument. Notice that to actually be able to use signals arguments, we need to explicitly define them like this. And yeah, let's we need to import the model here. Yeah, and now we can call search song on audio search model. Yes, and after that we will call first active focus on, I don't know, maybe on a top bar. We do that so our search field loses focus. Yeah, that should be it. Let's test it out. Okay, we have it. Let's go to search panel and let's search for something called, I don't know, hello, for instance. Yeah, so here are the results. It's coming from the REST API. It looks like that. And after you click on, we are back in our player. However, you can notice that the song was not added to the playlist. This is because the results are saved, but we have to call add audio function from player controller to actually add the song to the playlist. So let's go back to search panel. And in onClicked, we can, of mouse area, we can simply call player controller add audio method. And we will just pass values stored in delegate, so audio name, audio author, audio source, and audio image source. Okay, that should be it. Let's save and build. Fine. Now let's search for, I don't know, test maybe. Okay. So after clicking one of the results, it's in the playlist. You can freely switch to it. Yeah, and you should hear it as well. Now let's go again to search model, and let's search for, I don't know, A. Okay, no results. From user perspective, we don't know what failed, if it's still searching or not, or maybe there are just no results. Maybe we should add some information text here. Yeah, let's do that. So let's go to search panel, and next to list view, let's add a text item. It will be centered to whole search view. Its color will be gray. And now it will be only visible when audio search model is currently searching, or when list view count property is equal to 0. As a text, we will create a binding. So if our model is still searching, if it's still searching, then we will display searching. Otherwise, if count of our list is equal to 0, we will display no results. And if neither is true, we will return an empty string. Let's give it some pixel size of, I don't know, 24, and make it bold. Yeah, additionally, let's hide the list view with results when model is searching. Just let's set it to double negation of audio search model is searching, like this, so then it's boolean. Yeah, and now let's go to main QML file and lock our input field when the model is currently searching, when the network request is in progress. Yeah, and we should start the app now. Let's search for guinea pigs. Guinea pigs. Okay, there was one result. Maybe you noticed that a search field was blocked for a moment. Now let's search for something like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and we have nice no results indicator. And yeah, that would be it. We have pretty functional player right now. It gets songs not from our dummy data sets, but from real REST API. Yeah, so I think that Spotify may pack themselves. Okay, that would be it for today. Of course, you could extend your integration with REST API in many different ways. You could add post requests, put requests, many other things. But I wanted to show how the simple example integration with REST API from Qt project could look like. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave your thoughts, your comments, or general feedback in the comments. You know what to do now already. Just subscribe to our channel, follow us on LinkedIn, like the video, check the links in the description, especially as we are doing a cool thing. It's a podcast called Cute Talk. We talk there about cute and other fancy things. This episode is the last technical one from the current series, from QML tutorial series. But in the next episode, I will tell you how to learn QML development. I will give you some thoughts on the materials, on how you can develop yourself as a developer. See you there.